I'm Margaret Lawson, 64 years old, a retired teacher living in Austin, Texas. For nearly 4 decades, I poured everything I had into raising my 2 children, protecting every dollar my late husband left behind, and believing that, at this stage of life, I'd finally find peace, surrounded by family. But the moment I refused to pay $70,000 for my daughter's luxury wedding, everything shattered. The little girl who once called me her hero looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you're selfish. You don't even want me to be happy." 3 weeks later, she invited me to what she called a reconciliation dinner at an upscale private club. I wanted to believe she'd changed, that the bond between a mother and daughter was still strong enough to bring us back together. But when I walked into that private dining room, I didn't see love. I saw unfamiliar men with leather briefcases laying out thick stacks of paperwork. Power of attorney documents meant to hand over everything I had ever built to my daughter and her fiancé. And if I refused, they made it clear I might never see my future grandchild. In that moment, I realized this dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It was an ambush, planned down to the last detail. What Claire and Ethan didn't know, however, was that I had come prepared too. Before I continue, make sure you hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from in the comments, because trust me, what happened next will keep you glued to the very end. The burgundy dress still hung in my closet like a relic of better times. I'd worn it to Claire's law school graduation, then again at the dinner where she announced she'd made junior partner at her firm. Each time, she'd laughed and told me I looked elegant, that she was proud to introduce me as her mother. I used to believe her words were genuine, that we shared a bond deeper than ambition, stronger than money. But now, as I smoothed the fabric over my 64-year-old frame, I couldn't help but wonder if this dress would be the last thing I ever wore in honor of my daughter. The argument about her wedding had changed everything. $70,000. That's what Claire and her fiancé Ethan demanded. Not requested, not discussed, but demanded, as if my retirement savings, carefully preserved after Harold passed, belonged to them by birthright. "Mom, you're sitting on all that money while we're just starting our life," Claire had said, her tone sharp and cold, nothing like the little girl who once left me handwritten notes that said, "I love you, Mommy." I tried to explain that happiness doesn't come from marble fountains or imported orchids, that I was willing to contribute $15,000, a sum that could have covered a beautiful ceremony without sinking my future. But she looked at me with disdain, as though I'd failed her, as though my only worth lay in the size of my bank account. The silence after that fight had been unbearable. I spent my mornings tending to the small garden behind the duplex I moved into after Harold died, trying to find solace in the soil. But the ache of Claire's absence lingered in every flower bed, every unopened text thread on my phone. Then one Tuesday morning, she called. Her voice was softer, almost fragile. "Mom, maybe we've both been too stubborn. Can we talk over dinner? I want to make this right." My heart leapt in spite of myself. She was 3 months pregnant, barely showing, and I wanted so badly to believe motherhood would awaken something in her, some echo of the sacrifice and devotion I'd carried for decades. When she suggested the private dining room at the Hillside Club, I almost cried. That was where Harold had taken me for our 40th anniversary, where the candlelight softened his aging features and made me feel cherished all over again. I thought maybe Claire had chosen it deliberately, as a symbol, a place where healing could begin. I ironed the burgundy dress that afternoon with trembling hands, rehearsing words of apology, promises of forgiveness. The drive to the club took me past familiar landmarks, the church where both my children had been baptized, the park where Daniel learned to ride his bike, while Claire cheered him on. The old library where I spent countless Saturday mornings helping them with school projects. Each memory stung like a paper cut, small but sharp, reminders of a closeness that seemed so far away now. When I arrived, the Hillside Club looked exactly as I remembered: polished wood floors, golden chandeliers, the faint scent of roses drifting through the lobby. The hostess, a young woman with kind eyes, led me to a private room where Claire sat waiting. She was radiant in that effortless way only expectant mothers can be, her dark hair shining, her skin glowing. She rose to hug me, and for a fleeting moment, breathing in her familiar perfume, I felt that surge of unconditional love that had defined my life as a mother. "You look beautiful," I told her honestly, because she did. Whatever pain existed between us, she was still my daughter. "How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" She smiled faintly. "Better now. The second trimester is easier." She rested a protective hand on her belly, and I let myself imagine what it might be like to hold my grandchild, to share in that joy. "Ethan will be here any minute," she said casually. I nodded, trying not to let my discomfort show. I had always struggled with Ethan. Charming when he wanted to be, but dismissive, arrogant, too polished for his own good. A man who had failed at 2 startups already, yet carried himself like he deserved respect from the world. I told myself that love is blind, that maybe Claire saw something in him I couldn't. But deep down, I feared he saw something in me: a bank account he could access through my daughter. I tried to open the conversation gently. "I'm glad you called. Claire, I've missed you." For just a moment, I thought I saw guilt flicker in her eyes, but before I could be sure, the door opened and Ethan walked in. He wasn't alone. 3 men in dark suits followed him, briefcases in hand, their expressions calculated and cold. "Mrs. Lawson," Ethan said with a smile too smooth to be sincere. "Thank you for joining us." My stomach twisted. The room that had once held warm memories suddenly felt like a courtroom, the intimacy stripped away. I glanced at Claire, searching her face for answers, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "These are colleagues of mine," Ethan said, pulling out a chair. "They have some paperwork for you to review." One of the men, silver-haired with a predator's smile, introduced himself as Richard Hale, attorney at law. He slid a manila folder across the table. "Mrs. Lawson, this is a simple matter. We're proposing you sign power of attorney so that Claire and Ethan can manage your financial affairs. It's really in everyone's best interest." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Power of attorney: control over my accounts, my property, my life. I looked at my daughter, hoping for denial, for protest, for some sign that this wasn't her doing. But she sat still, hands folded, gaze fixed on the table. "Given your age," Richard continued smoothly, "and the fact that you live alone now, it makes sense for younger family members to oversee complex matters like investments, property, insurance." "My age," I interrupted, my voice quiet but steady. "I'm 64, not 94. He chuckled politely. "Of course, but wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about these things, to let Claire and Ethan handle the responsibility?" I opened the folder. The papers were exactly what I feared: documents that would strip me of control, leaving everything Harold and I had built in someone else's hands. My hands trembled slightly, but not from weakness, from fury. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. Finally, Claire looked up. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Then you won't see your grandchild grow up," she said simply. In that moment, something in me broke, not from defeat, but from realization. The reconciliation dinner had been a trap, and my own daughter was the bait. But what Claire and Ethan didn't know was that I had seen this coming, and I wasn't as defenseless as they imagined. I sat there in that private dining room, the weight of the folder pressing against my fingertips, while my daughter's words echoed like a verdict: "You won't see your grandchild grow up." It was a knife, sharp and deliberate, and it cut deeper than anything Ethan or those lawyers could have said. My daughter, the same little girl I once stayed up all night rocking through fevers, was now weaponizing the very child I had longed to meet. The air in the room grew thick, the soft light of the chandeliers, the clinking of silverware from the main hall, Even the faint strains of classical music, all of it blurred into background noise. Across the table, Ethan leaned back in his chair with the smug ease of a man who thought he had already won. He gestured toward the documents. "It's really quite simple, Mrs. Lawson. With your signature, we can ensure your legacy is protected, your affairs managed properly. Claire and I will handle the details so you can enjoy your retirement without worry." Enjoy my retirement, I almost laughed. Did they think I spent 40 years teaching, saving, stretching every paycheck, only to hand it all over to a man who still owed money from his last failed startup? I turned my eyes back to Claire. "Was this your idea or his?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost too calm. Inside, a storm raged, but I refused to let them see it. Her jaw tightened, her fingers brushing protectively against her stomach. "It doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is the baby. You either help us or you're out." Out, as though family was something you could simply erase with a stroke of a pen. One of the younger lawyers, barely out of law school by the look of him, pushed the folder closer. "If you could just sign here and here, Mrs. Lawson, we can take care of the rest tonight." His tone was rehearsed, professional, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Perhaps even he knew this wasn't right. I closed the folder gently, placing both hands on top of it. "And if I refuse?" I asked again, making sure my gaze landed on Ethan. He smiled, but the corners of his mouth twitched. "Then we'll have to reconsider your access to Claire and the baby. And let's be honest, at your age, these opportunities don't come around forever." There it was, the threat, laid bare in the slick language of business negotiations. Only this wasn't business. This was my life. I took a breath, steadying myself. The truth was, part of me had anticipated something like this. Ethan had always carried himself like a man with too many secrets, too many debts hiding just out of sight. I hadn't wanted to believe Clara would go along with his schemes, but the warning signs were there: her sudden coldness, the contempt in her voice when I offered less than she demanded, the way she had stopped visiting unless she needed something. I slipped my hand into my purse, pretending to search for a pen. Instead, my fingers brushed the cool surface of my phone. I scrolled quickly until I found the number I'd saved weeks ago, a precaution born from a gnawing instinct. My thumb hovered, and then I pressed calls. "Mom," Claire's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" The voice that answered on the other end was steady, reliable, and exactly what I needed in that moment. "Daniel," I said, my tone firm, "I need you to come to the Hillside Club, private dining room 3, now." I ended the call before he could argue. Silence hung heavy. Ethan's confident smile faltered for just a moment, and the lawyers exchanged wary glances. "You didn't need to involve Daniel," Claire said sharply, her voice carrying that old adolescent whine she used when she didn't get her way. "Didn't I?" I folded my hands neatly in my lap, because it seems to me, when you invite a team of lawyers to dinner, you've already involved plenty of people. Richard Hale cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lawson, family matters can be emotional. Perhaps it would be best to settle this quietly, without outside interference." I met his gaze directly. "How thoughtful of you to notice. But I assure you, I'm quite capable of handling emotion and interference." The minutes ticked by like hours. I knew Daniel's hospital was only a 20-minute drive, if he caught the lights. 20 minutes of holding my ground, while my own daughter sat across from me, aligning herself with a man who wanted to strip me of everything. Ethan leaned forward, his voice dripping with false charm. "Margaret, may I call you Margaret? We're all family here. We don't want to fight. We just want to make sure everyone is secure." "You may call me Mrs. Lawson," I said coolly. His smile cracked, just for a heartbeat. "Fine, Mrs. Lawson. This is about trust. Don't you trust Claire to have your best interests at heart?" The question sliced deep, because once upon a time, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now, staring into the calculating eyes of the woman who had once clutched my hand at night after nightmares, I wasn't so sure. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Tell me, Ethan, when exactly did you start planning this little dinner? Was it before or after you and Claire decided $70,000 wasn't enough of a demand? His eyes flickered, just enough for me to know I'd struck a nerve. Claire's chin lifted, defiant. We've been discussing options for weeks. Mom, you made it clear you don't care about my future. You forced our hand. Options, I repeated, tasting the word like something sour. Is that what we're calling extortion these days? It's not extortion, she snapped, her voice rising, drawing curious glances from wait staff, passing the door. It's family. Families take care of each other. No, I said quietly, my voice steady with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Families love each other. They don't ambush their mothers with lawyers and ultimatums. Before she could respond, the door opened, and there he was, Daniel, still in his hospital scrubs, his dark hair mussed from what must have been a frantic drive. His eyes swept the room, sharp and assessing, taking in the folder, the lawyers, the tension that hung in the air like smoke. Mom, he said simply, and just like that, the balance of power shifted. For the first time all evening, I felt something like hope. Daniel didn't waste time with pleasantries. He stepped inside, his presence steady and commanding, the same energy I'd seen him carry in hospital rooms when life and death decisions rested on his shoulders. His eyes moved across the table, the folder, the lawyers, Ethan's smug face, and finally Claire. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show alarm, but the weight of his silence was enough to make even Ethan shift in his chair. I'm Lawson, Daniel said evenly, though his gaze never left Ethan. My mother called me. Yes, I said softly, gesturing toward the empty chair. Thank you for coming. Ethan plastered on that salesman's grin of his and extended a hand. Ethan Brooks, your sister's fiancé. We were just having a little family discussion. Daniel shook his hand briefly, then sat, ignoring the lawyers. His eyes fell on the manila folder, which still sat unopened on the table. With calm precision, he flipped it open and skimmed the documents, his brows tightening as he scanned the language. Power of attorney, he muttered. Interesting. He closed it again and slid it toward me. Mom, did you ask for this? No, I said firmly. I did not. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Ethan again, his voice controlled but sharp. So tell me, why are you pressuring my 64-year-old mother to sign away her financial rights in the middle of a dinner at a private club with lawyers? Ethan chuckled, though the sound was forced. You're misunderstanding. We're not pressuring her. We're trying to help. Managing assets, investments, property, it's complicated. We thought it would be safer. Safer for who? Daniel cut him off. His tone wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like a scalpel. The younger lawyer shifted uncomfortably, while the older one, Richard Hale, leaned forward as if to regain control. Dr. Lawson, Richard said smoothly, these matters can sometimes be delicate. We simply believe that consolidating authority under younger family members is best practice. Your mother is alone now. Surely you see the wisdom. I see manipulation, Daniel snapped, his eyes flashing with the same cold fury I remembered from his teenage years whenever he witnessed injustice. And I see my sister sitting here, silent, letting her fiancé and his hired guns bully our mother. Claire's face flushed. Daniel, stop it. This isn't what you think. We're doing this for the baby, for our family's future. Then why does it look like extortion? Daniel asked. His voice softened slightly, but the disappointment in his tone was cutting. Why does it look like you're using that baby as leverage against Mom? For the first time all night, Claire faltered. Her hands trembled as they rested on the curve of her stomach. She opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again, staring down at the table, as if the answers might appear in the wood grain. Ethan reached across the table, attempting to reclaim control. This is ridiculous. We're not criminals. We just want security. Mrs. Lawson can't handle these responsibilities forever. The sooner she hands things over, the sooner we can ensure everything is taken care of." Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice a low growl. "She raised us. She managed bills, mortgages, debts, and a dying husband's hospital care without help. She put both of us through school. She balanced every checkbook to the penny. Don't insult her intelligence by pretending she can't manage her own affairs." The younger lawyer glanced at Richard, as if silently asking, what did we walk into? Richard's carefully rehearsed confidence was slipping, his tone less certain. "Dr. Lawson, perhaps we should step aside and allow your mother and sister to discuss this privately." "No," Daniel said, cutting him off. "This isn't private anymore. You brought your lawyers into a family matter, so now it's going to be handled differently." He turned to me then, his expression softening. "Mom, are you okay?" The question nearly undid me. For the first time that evening, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not tears of fear, but of relief. Relief that at least one of my children still saw me as more than a bank account, more than a pawn to be moved around. "I'm fine," I whispered. "Better now that you're here." Daniel gave a slight nod, then turned his attention back to Ethan. "Let me make this simple. My mother isn't signing anything tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. And if you push her, I'll make sure the state bar hears about the lawyers involved in this little stunt." Richard Hale stiffened. "Now hold on." But Daniel's glare silenced him. I'd seen that look before in emergency rooms when he faced down chaos and demanded order. It wasn't just authority, it was certainty, and it left no room for negotiation. Ethan tried again, his voice strained. "You don't understand. There are expenses, wedding costs, the baby." "And whose fault is that?" Daniel asked coldly. "Mom already offered 15,000. That's more than generous. You wanted 70. Now you want control over everything. This isn't about a baby, it's about greed." Claire finally looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Daniel, you don't get it. You've always had everything: your career, your success, your stability. Ethan and I are just trying to catch up. Don't you want me to be happy?" Her words stung. Because once, long ago, I might have asked myself the same question. But Daniel shook his head. "Happiness doesn't come from stealing from your own mother. If you think it does, you've already lost more than you realize." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time, Ethan's polished facade cracked, his jaw clenched, his hand fisted on the table. He looked less like the confident entrepreneur he pretended to be, and more like a man whose schemes were slipping through his fingers. I sat back, watching it unfold, feeling the balance of power shifting inch by inch, and I realized something important: I wasn't alone anymore. Daniel was here, and together, we weren't going to let them take what Harold and I had spent a lifetime building. But what none of them knew, not Ethan, not Claire, not even Daniel, was that I had already taken steps weeks ago to protect myself. Steps that would soon bring this entire charade crashing down around Ethan's carefully constructed world. Daniel's words still hung in the air like thunder that hadn't yet rolled away. Across the table, Ethan clenched his jaw, his bravado unraveling thread by thread. Claire sat rigid, her face pale, torn between the man she loved and the mother she was betraying. I stayed silent, letting the tension breathe, letting them wonder why I wasn't caving. Inside, my pulse pounded, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was resolve. What they didn't know was that I had already built my own fortress. Weeks ago, after Claire's first outburst about the wedding money, a voice inside me had whispered a warning: "This isn't over. Protect yourself now." That voice had led me to Barbara Hale, a family attorney with silver hair, a steel spine, and a reputation for seeing through manipulation like glass. I remembered the afternoon clearly. Barbara's office smelled faintly of old leather and lemon polish, her shelves stacked with law books that seemed older than me. She listened patiently as I told her everything: Claire's demand for 70,000, Ethan's mounting debts, the way my daughter's love had started to feel like a transaction. When I finished, Barbara leaned back, folded her hands, and said, "You're wise to be here. Women your age, especially widows, are prime targets, but you don't have to be a victim, not if we prepare." Prepare, we did. She guided me through setting up an irrevocable trust, my house, my savings, Harold's life insurance. All of it was transferred under legal protection with Daniel as trustee until Claire's child reached adulthood. It meant I no longer owned my assets outright. But it also meant no one, not even Claire, could touch them without Daniel's oversight. I left Barbara's office that day, lighter than I'd felt in months. For the first time, I knew I had armor. Now, sitting across from my daughter and her fiancé, I reached into my purse again. Ethan's eyes followed the movement like a hawk, expecting me to pull out a pen, maybe my checkbook. Instead, I retrieved my phone, calmly, deliberately. I scrolled until I found Barbara's number. "Who are you calling?" Ethan demanded, his voice sharper than before. I pressed dial. "Barbara Hale," I said smoothly. "My attorney. She'll be joining us shortly." The room shifted instantly. Ethan's smugness evaporated, his mouth falling open in disbelief. Richard Hale, the lead lawyer at his side, blinked rapidly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Lawson, did you say Barbara Hale?" His tone wasn't casual now. It was wary. "Yes," I answered. "You know her." A pause, then, with the faintest twitch at his temple, Richard admitted, "Everyone in family law knows her." I smiled, letting that silence linger. For the first time since the meal began, it was Ethan and his lawyers who looked cornered. Claire's voice broke the stillness. "Mom, why would you bring a lawyer into this? We're family. We should handle this ourselves." "Family," I repeated, tilting my head. "Family doesn't ambush each other with legal documents at a dinner table. You chose to bring lawyers. Claire, I simply chose to bring my own." Ethan recovered enough to sneer. "This is unnecessary. No one's trying to steal anything." "Then why the secrecy?" Daniel interrupted sharply. He pointed at the unopened bottle of wine sitting on the table. "Why invite Mom to a reconciliation dinner only to spring this on her? Why the lawyers? If this was really about care and protection, you would have been honest, transparent, but you weren't." Claire flinched. Ethan glared at Daniel but didn't answer. I leaned forward, my hands steady, my voice low but piercing. "Let me make something very clear. You think I came here unprepared, that I'm just some aging widow who can be cornered. But while you were scheming, I was planning. I've already secured my assets in a trust. I've already ensured that my children, and only my children, are beneficiaries. And Ethan," I let his name drip with disdain, "that means you will never touch a single cent of what Harold and I built." Ethan's brows darkened, his veneer of charm cracking into something uglier. "You can't do this," he hissed. "Claire is your daughter. You can't cut her out." "I didn't cut her out," I replied evenly. "I cut you out. There's a difference." The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, no longer so eager to push the folder toward me. Even the younger one, who had seemed so eager earlier, was now staring at his hands. Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Mom, you don't have to explain yourself. Not to them. You've done everything right." For a moment, the warmth of his hand grounded me, gave me strength. I looked back at Claire, my voice softening though my resolve didn't waver. "Sweetheart, I will always love you, but love doesn't mean surrendering everything I have to prove it. If you can't separate me from my money, then you've already lost the part of me that matters most." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Ethan, furious now, slammed his palm against the table. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll find another way." I met his glare without flinching. "Try," I said simply. "But know this, you're not just up against me anymore. You're up against Daniel and Barbara and every ounce of strength I have left. And I promise you, Ethan, you will regret underestimating me." The silence that followed was electric, thick with the realization that the game had changed. I sat back in my chair, calm and deliberate, as if I'd just placed the final piece in a puzzle they hadn't even realized I'd been building. For the first time that night, I wasn't reacting, I was leading. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The atmosphere in that dining room was combustible. Ethan fumed like a man watching his empire slip through his fingers. Claire stared down at her hands, torn between shame and defiance. The lawyers whispered among themselves, no longer looking like predators, but cornered men trying to calculate an exit strategy. Daniel sat solid beside me, his presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone. And then, the door opened. Barbara Hale didn't need an introduction. She walked in with the confidence of a woman who had seen every trick, every scheme, every pathetic attempt to bully someone weaker, and lived to dismantle it all. At 70, she carried herself with quiet authority, her silver hair cut sharp, her eyes sharper still. She didn't wait for permission. She simply took a seat at the table like she owned the room. "Good evening," she said warmly, nodding toward me, Margaret, Daniel. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan and his lawyers. The warmth vanished. "Gentlemen." Richard Hale, the senior lawyer on Ethan's side, straightened in his chair, clearing his throat. "Miss Hale, this is a private family matter. I don't believe your presence is appropriate." Barbara smiled, a razor-thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "On the contrary, when my client is ambushed at a reconciliation dinner with 3 attorneys and a stack of power of attorney documents, my presence becomes not only appropriate, but essential." The younger lawyer squirmed, his hands fidgeting with his pen. Ethan leaned forward, trying to reclaim control. "This is ridiculous. We're simply trying to ensure Margaret's financial stability. Claire and I are building a family. Isn't that what you want, Margaret, for your grandchild to have security?" Barbara cut him off before I could speak. "Don't insult us, Mr. Brooks. We both know this isn't about security. It's about access to money, to property, to power that doesn't belong to you." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. With deliberate care, she spread several documents across the table. "What you're looking at, gentlemen, is an irrevocable trust, executed and filed 3 weeks ago. All of Margaret Lawson's assets have been transferred to it, with her son Daniel as trustee, until her grandchildren reach adulthood." The silence was deafening. Ethan's face drained of color. Claire gasped softly, her eyes darting between me and Barbara, as if hoping this was some elaborate bluff. "You're lying," Ethan finally snapped, though his voice wavered. Barbara didn't blink. "File stamped by the county clerk's office. Would you like to see the seal?" She slid the top page closer. The official embossed stamp gleamed under the chandelier's light. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms, his jaw set in quiet satisfaction. "Looks pretty real to me." Richard Hale reached for the papers, scanning quickly. His composure faltered. "Irrevocable," he muttered, almost to himself. Which means, Barbara interrupted crisply, "that your client and his fiancé have no authority over these assets. None. Not now. Not ever." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "This is absurd. Claire is her daughter. She has a right." "She has no right," Barbara said coolly. "Not to money she didn't earn. Not to assets she didn't build. Margaret has provided generously $15,000, more than enough for a beautiful wedding. The rest," she leaned forward, her gaze locked on Ethan. "The rest is not yours to demand." Claire's lip trembled. "Mom," her voice was small, uncertain. "Why would you do this? Why would you shut me out like this?" I looked at her, my heart aching despite my anger. "I didn't shut you out, Claire. I shut him out. This trust is for you, for Daniel, for my grandchildren, but not for Ethan. Not ever for Ethan." Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I saw the little girl who once brought me dandelions from the yard, who once told me she wanted to be just like Mommy. But then she blinked, and the coldness returned. "Ethan is my family now," she whispered. Barbara's expression softened, but only slightly. "Then perhaps you should ask yourself why your family keeps trying to strip your mother of hers." The younger lawyer finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Ms. Hale, if I may, there's clearly been some miscommunication. Perhaps we should table this discussion." "Excellent idea," Barbara interrupted smoothly. "But not before we make something clear." She turned to Ethan. "If you or your associates make one more attempt to question Margaret's competence, to gather false medical records, or to interfere with her finances, I will personally see to it that charges of elder abuse and fraud are filed. And unlike you, Mr. Brooks, I know how to win in court." Ethan's face twisted, rage barely contained. He looked at Claire, desperate for support, but she avoided his gaze. Richard Hale exhaled slowly, gathering his papers with shaky hands. "Gentlemen," he said to his colleagues, "I think we're done here." The younger lawyers followed his lead, their once predatory confidence reduced to shame. Within moments, they had excused themselves, leaving Ethan and Claire alone with us. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, you haven't seen the last of me." Daniel's eyes flashed. "Get used to losing, Ethan, because this fight is over." I stood, smoothing the burgundy dress that still clung to my frame like a silent witness. My voice was steady, stronger than I thought possible. "Ethan Brooks, stay away from my family. Stay away from my home. And if I hear you've made one more inquiry about my finances or my competency, Barbara and I will make sure you regret it." For the first time all night, Ethan had no words. I turned to Claire, my chest tight. "Sweetheart, when you're ready to talk about your baby, about your future, about what family really means, you call me, but call me alone." With that, I gathered my purse, Daniel at my side, Barbara behind us like a shield, and I walked out of that dining room into the cool Texas night. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. I felt free. The night after the Hillside Club dinner, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea, staring at the burgundy dress draped over the back of a chair. My hands still trembled, not from fear anymore, but from the release of months of tension. For weeks, I had lived in dread of what Claire and Ethan might do next. Now, with Barbara's presence solidifying my protection and Daniel standing tall beside me, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: safety. But relief was tangled with grief. Claire's words, "Ethan is my family," now echoed in my mind. I tried to tell myself it was just fear speaking, that she was blinded by love, manipulated by Ethan's schemes. Still, it cut deep. I had raised her to be strong, to fight for herself, to never let anyone reduce her worth to dollars and cents. And now here she was, doing exactly that to me. The next morning, the phone rang. My first instinct was panic, an old reflex after months of manipulation. But the caller ID showed Daniel. His voice was calm but heavy. "Mom, I thought you should know. Ethan's name is popping up at the hospital. Rumors, debt collectors. One of the anesthesiologists told me he's into some pretty bad gambling." My stomach twisted, even though I'd suspected something like this. "Claire knows." "I don't think so. Or maybe she doesn't want to know." Daniel sighed. "But people are talking. If Ethan thinks he can worm his way into your finances, he's not just desperate, he's dangerous." Dangerous. The word lodged itself in my chest. I wanted to protect Claire, to shield her from the wreckage of the man she'd chosen. But how do you save someone who won't admit they need saving? Later that week, I received an unexpected knock on my door. It was Janet, my new neighbor, a widow about my age, who had moved into the duplex next door after selling the home she'd shared with her husband. She carried a casserole dish, her silver hair pinned back, her eyes warm but curious. "Thought you could use company." She said simply. We sat at my kitchen table, steam rising from the casserole between us. Somehow, in the quiet presence of another woman who understood loss, the whole story spilled out of me. I told her about Claire's demands, Ethan's arrogance, the ambush with the lawyers, and the trust I'd set up with Barbara's help. Janet listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, her expression calm but fierce. Finally, she set down her fork. You know, you're not alone. My kids tried something similar last year, wanted me to sell the house and move into assisted living so they could manage the equity. She rolled her eyes. I didn't spend 45 years raising them just to let them cash me out like a 401k. I laughed, a real laugh, the first in what felt like months. It was bitter and sweet at the same time. How did you handle it? I told them their inheritance was being spent on my happiness. She grinned, her eyes sparkling, every dime, and I meant it. That night, after Janet left, I thought long and hard about what she said. Maybe healing wasn't about getting Claire back right away. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for her to see Ethan for who he really was. Maybe healing was about reclaiming my own life, my own happiness, without apology. Barbara called 2 days later to update me. Ethan's attempts to access your medical records, she said, her tone crisp. We've got evidence now. Enough to press charges if necessary. And his little inquiry about your property value. I've filed a notice with the county. He won't get far. Thank you, I whispered, my voice cracked, surprising me. Barbara, I don't know what I'd have done without you. You would have found a way, she replied firmly. But now, you don't have to fight alone. And Margaret, remember this: protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. Those words sat with me for days. Protecting myself wasn't cruelty, it was survival. The following Sunday, Daniel stopped by after his hospital shift, his scrubs still wrinkled, his eyes tired but kind. He brought groceries and insisted on cooking breakfast, though he nearly burned the bacon. As we ate at the small table, he studied me carefully. Mom, I need to ask, he said quietly. Do you still want a relationship with Claire, after everything? My throat tightened. She's my daughter, Daniel. I'll always want that. But not at the cost of my dignity. Not at the cost of my future. If she chooses Ethan over me, I can't stop her, but I can stop letting her use me. Daniel nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. I just wanted to hear you say it out loud. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. I blinked back tears, squeezing his hand in return. For years I had been the strong one, the protector. Now, Daniel was stepping into that role, not just for me, but for himself. That afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood, breathing in the crisp Texas air. Children laughed in the park, dogs barked in yards. Life moved on as if nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that dinner at the Hillside Club. I wasn't prey anymore. I thought about what Barbara said, about what Janet shared, about Daniel's quiet strength. And for the first time, I realized something profound. Maybe my life wasn't narrowing. Maybe it was opening. Claire and Ethan might still try to come at me. They might find new schemes, new threats, but I wasn't the woman who flinched anymore. I was the woman who planned, who protected, who fought back. And deep in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning of a different kind of story, one where I chose myself, even if it meant losing the daughter I once thought I couldn't live without. It was 3 weeks after the Hillside Club dinner when the next call came. I was pruning roses in the little garden behind my duplex, trying to teach myself the patience of flowers, how they survive pruning and still bloom stronger. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Claire's name flash across the screen, my chest tightened. Part of me wanted to let it ring, to spare myself another wound. But love is stubborn, I answered. Her voice was shaky, brittle in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. Mom, can we talk? Please, just you and me. Every instinct screamed caution, yet something inside me whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was cracking under the weight of Ethan's schemes. I agreed, but on my terms. We met at a quiet coffee shop, neutral ground. When she walked in, she didn't have the glow she carried at the Hillside Club. Her skin looked pale, her hair pulled back in haste, her once confident posture hunched. She sat across from me and wrapped her hands around a paper cup as if it were the only warmth she had left. "Mom," she began, her eyes glassy, "Ethan's in trouble." I said nothing. I let her words hang, waiting for the truth to spill on its own. He's been lying to me," she confessed, "about money, about business, about everything." Her voice cracked. "I found out he owes nearly 80,000 to a private lender. They've been calling the house, threatening him." I closed my eyes, a mix of sadness and vindication washing over me. "And what did he tell you?" "That you could fix it," she whispered. "That if I convinced you to give us access to the trust, everything would be fine." She met my gaze then, and the desperation in her eyes was unmistakable. But I know now, it was never about us. It was always about him. Hearing her say it should have been a relief, but instead it broke me all over again. My daughter, brilliant and strong, reduced to begging because of a man who saw her only as a stepping stone. "Claire," I said softly, "you have to decide, Gita, him or your family, him or your future. I can't make that choice for you." She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm pregnant, Mom. I thought he'd change. I thought if I stood by him, he'd grow into the man I believed he could be. But now, I don't even recognize him." I reached across the table, covering her trembling hands with mine. "Sweetheart, loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your soul. You've been carrying his mistakes like they're yours. They're not. You don't have to sink just because he's drowning." Her sobs came quietly at first, then heavier, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I was holding my daughter again, not the cold, calculating woman from the Hillside Club, but the child who once ran to me with scraped knees and whispered, "Don't let go, Mommy." We sat in silence for a while, her tears soaking into a napkin, my thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Finally, she looked up, her voice small. "Do you hate me?" My throat tightened. "I could never hate you, but I hate what you've let him turn you into. And I hate that you thought money mattered more than us." Her lips trembled. "Can I fix this?" "You can start," I said gently, "but fixing it isn't about me. It's about you choosing who you want to be, and who you want to raise that baby to be." For the first time, I saw resolve flicker in her eyes, fragile but real. That night, Daniel called after his shift. Claire showed up at the hospital. He said carefully, she asked if she could stay with me for a while, without Ethan. I felt my heart catch. "And what did you say?" I told her my door's open, but only if she comes alone. No negotiations, no schemes. She nodded. "I think she's serious this time." He paused. "Mom," she looked broken. I stared out the window at the quiet street beyond my duplex. Street lamps hummed, casting yellow pools on the pavement. "Sometimes," I whispered, "you have to break before you can rebuild." Over the next week, Claire moved a few boxes into Daniel's apartment. Ethan showed up twice, pounding on the door, shouting her name. Both times, Daniel called security, his voice calm, his presence unshakable. Each time Ethan left, Claire cried, but she didn't go back with him. Meanwhile, word spread. Ethan's business associates began distancing themselves. Barbara called me one afternoon, her tone edged with satisfaction. "Your would-be son-in-law is under investigation for misusing client funds. Looks like the house of cards is falling." Justice, karma, whatever you wanted to call it, it was happening. And yet, instead of satisfaction, all I felt was exhaustion. Because this wasn't just about Ethan's downfall, it was about my daughter standing at a crossroads, finally forced to choose between manipulation and redemption. One evening, Claire came to my duplex. She stood on my porch, hesitant, her belly more pronounced now, her eyes swollen from tears. I opened the door slowly, unsure of what she'd say. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I don't want to lose you, or this baby. I'm done with Ethan, for good." I studied her face, searching for the girl I once knew. And in that moment, I saw her not fully, not perfectly, but enough to believe she was trying. I stepped aside, holding the door open. "Come in, Claire, let's talk." And for the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like the beginning of something new. When I look back on that night at the Hillside Club, it feels like another lifetime. I walked in expecting reconciliation, and instead found betrayal dressed up in tailored suits and legal jargon. But what Ethan and even Claire didn't understand was that I wasn't the naive widow they assumed. I was a woman who had already survived loss, already rebuilt from ashes. And I wasn't about to let anyone family or not reduce me to a bank account. Since then, my life has changed in ways I never imagined. I've built new friendships with women like Janet, neighbors who remind me that resilience is contagious. I've leaned on Barbara and Daniel, proof that strength comes not only from within, but also from the people who stand beside you when the storm hits. And slowly, painfully, Claire has begun to find her way back, not perfectly, not without scars, but with a willingness to choose truth over illusion. Healing doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens in the quiet decisions we make afterward, the choice to set boundaries, to protect ourselves, to forgive where it's safe, and to walk away where it isn't. I learned that love can survive betrayal, but only if respect is rebuilt. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do as a mother is to say no more, not like this. So, if you've been listening to my story, I want you to remember this: you are stronger than you think. No matter how deeply someone betrays you, you can stand back up, protect what's yours, and still leave room for hope. Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love? Your stories matter here. And if this video spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it's survival. Thank you for listening. Until next time, this is Margaret's story, and maybe a reminder that sometimes the greatest revenge just is not anger, but the freedom to live on your own terms.